morning. We gather here this morning as people are gathering in many congregations around the Twin Cities, grieving the mass shooting at the Annunciation Catholic Church and School in Minneapolis just 4 days ago. As we begin our service this morning, I want us to take just a moment together to acknowledge what has happened and how we may be feeling. Our hearts, of course, are with the families of the 2 young children who were killed, and with the 15 other children and 3 adults who were injured and are recovering, whether in the hospital or at home. Our hearts are also with the first responders and medical teams who have been caring for those people. We grieve that spaces that should be safe, a church and a school, were violated, leaving both children and adults afraid. We unequivocally and unapologetically reject the anti-trans rhetoric that arose in the wake of reporting that the shooter was transgender. It remains true that the vast majority of mass shootings are committed by white, cisgender, straight young men, and we refuse to allow an already marginalized community to be demonized because of the actions of one person, no matter how horrific those actions were. We affirm as Unitarian Universalists that trans people are whole and holy and beloved, just like everyone else. We hurt for our transgender beloveds within and beyond this congregation as they see and hear that rhetoric, and also as they yet again see a transgender person being misgendered and dead-named in news media and elsewhere. We affirm as Unitarian Universalists that all people have the right to claim the fullness of their identities and to be respected. And while nothing justifies acts of violence like the one that happened on Wednesday, we must also recognize and name that churches have often been sites of harm, including to LGBTQIA+ people. And we here at MVUUF commit to doing all that we can to ensure that in this religious community, we provide a safe space and a warm welcome to all people, where they will know that they are not only welcomed, but celebrated and loved. We continue to grieve, and we also continue to live out our values, grounded in a love bigger than us all. And now, will you please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing hymn number 1 in our gray hymnal, and of course also on the slides, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door.
Good morning and welcome to Minnesota Valley UU Fellowship. My name is Maureen and I serve as one of the worship associates of this growing community that journeys together. If you're visiting us for the first time or early in your journey with us, We invite you to fill out a visitor form and take home a green visitor packet with more information in it. Folks joining us on Zoom or YouTube can find a link to the visitor form in the chat or the comment section. Whether it's your first time worshiping with us or your 100th time, we hope you'll find here questions that will stretch you, people to befriend you, and liberal religious values that challenge you to join us in loving boldly, living justly, and welcoming radically. Our chalice lighting this morning comes to us from Adam Slate. We gather this morning as one community, a community united by common ideals: love, justice, diversity, freedom, mutual care, equity. Yet look around. Look at the faces of those around you. Each face represents an individual. Every one of us with our own story, needs, strengths, and faults. We light our chalice today, honoring our common connection and also the uniqueness that lives within each of us. Please join in singing hymn number 346, Come Sing a Song.
We arrive here this morning, as we do every week, with both joys and sorrows in our hearts. And one of the many promises that we make to each other here in this beloved community is that we will both help celebrate the joys and help bear the sorrows. If you have a brief personal joy or sorrow to share this morning, please raise your hand and an usher will bring you the microphone.
Good morning. Good morning. Hi, I'm Barb Gillian. This is kind of a joy. Many of you who've been here for a while know Jean Simpson, our member who has a pretty aggressive form of Parkinson's disease. And a few of us learned this week that Jean is moving to Wisconsin to live with her daughter and family. And she had been living in an assisted living facility in Richfield. And she seems to be happy about this decision. And I'm hoping, Diana, maybe we could put her address, her Wisconsin address in the Friday email, perhaps, so that, because I know she would welcome cards. She doesn't want to lose touch with us.
Great.
So we wish her well.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Carla Reese, and I have both a concern and a joy. My concern, I work at an elementary school. My kids go to high school. And just, let's keep, we can't stop living because people out there are going to do bad things, but do keep all those beautiful children in your thoughts, please, and may we all stay safe. My joy is that this past weekend, I got to attend the 105th celebration reunion for a summer camp I used to attend as a young person. I spent 13 summers in the mountains of North Carolina, and it was a formative time. We all shared how that decision by our parents changed our lives, how we became stronger, better women for it, and being with those people and being just who we are helped us remember how great it is to be in a place that you can just be who you are and that accepts you and loves you just for being you, and how we all leave that place always wanting to be better humans. And I just wanted to share. It was so lovely, and I hope everyone has spaces like that. Thank you.
Do we have any online joys or sorrows? No, okay.
I'm Steve Danko, and my joy is that the parking lot is done. Yay! It may not sound like a personal joy, but to me it is. Mark Cleary, who you probably all, many of you know, arranged it and took care of it, so thank you.
Right. Well, we will also hold in our hearts not only the joys and sorrows spoken aloud, but those which have not been named, and yet we know that we carry them in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. Please join me in the sung response. The words for our centering space this morning come from my friend and colleague, Reverend Jen Crow, who serves as senior minister at First Universalist in Minneapolis. Right now, our job, as the poet Andrea Gibson wrote, is to let your heart break so that your spirit doesn't. Right now, our job is to cry and rage and grieve. Our job is to comfort our children and hold them close, and to remember, as Reverend Danny Givens notably said, that there are no other people's children. Our job right now is to make our Sunday prayers real, to show up for our community and ourselves and each other, showing through our actions that you are not alone. We are holding it together. Our job right now is to bring as much love as we can to ourselves, each other, and our larger community, to do our best to make every suffering bearable, even this unbearable one, with our presence, our compassion, and our commitment. I have just a couple of announcements this morning. The first one is that our hospitality teams program is part of the foundation on which our Sunday gatherings are built. Through it, we coordinate our efforts related to greeting visitors, passing the mic during joys and sorrows, hosting the post-service social hour, and much more. Each of our 5 teams manages hospitality on a scheduled rotating basis from mid-September through early June. Individual team members' duties as greeters, ushers, and social hour hosts are limited and flexible. We are now soliciting volunteers for the 2025-2026 fellowship year. In 2024 and 25, we had 43 participants. We are hoping to increase those ranks somewhat so that each of our teams will have at least 10 team members. A sign-up sheet for new volunteers will be available in person during our next 2 social hours and before the service next week. A link to sign up online will also be available in next Friday's weekly email. For more information, please contact Hospitality's Interim Director, Steve Vincent, and thanks to Steve for this morning's announcement and his work to organize those teams. Secondly, there's just a reminder that 2 weeks from today, on September 14th, our service will include both our annual water communion and a blessing of the backpacks for all ages. So we invite you to please bring a small amount of water that is meaningful to you to add to our communal waters. And if you have a backpack, briefcase, or other bag that you would like blessed for the year ahead, bring it with you too. Generosity is one of the spiritual qualities that we aspire to, and one of the practices that we nurture in this community. With our offering each Sunday morning, we give of our resources to support the work of this congregation. We know, of course, that giving financially is only one of the ways that we support that work. We do it too with our time and our talents, including on those hospitality teams. All 3 of those, time and talent and what's often called treasure, our financial contributions, all 3 of those are necessary for the vital work that we do together, both for each other and for our wider community. We here at MVUUF donate half of our collection every Sunday to support one of our community partners, organizations who are in alignment with our values. And those recipients, just so you're all aware, are chosen by SARJ, the Social Action Racial Justice Team. For the summer months, so this is the last Sunday for this, our sharing partner is Bloomington Pride, of which we are a sponsor. You can give in person as baskets are brought around, or online using either the QR code on the screen and on the printed order of service, or the donate online link on our website. Please give as generously as you are able.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and by this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and by this we
Before we move into the next portion of our service, while we're still on the topic of generosity, I know that some of you have been wondering how to support the Annunciation Catholic Church and School community. There have now been several fundraisers started, but I believe the primary one is one through the Minneapolis Foundation, which in partnership with the city created a text to donate line to help people affected by the shooting, and they will work with the Annunciation community to equitably distribute those funds in the coming days and weeks. You can text ACF1 to 41444. Don't worry about remembering that. You can ask me later, but it will also be in the Friday email this week. And then GoFundMe is also organizing verified fundraisers for the people and family impacted. So there are multiple ways that you can give if you feel called to do so. Thank you for your generosity. So this morning, as hopefully most of you already know, instead of a sermon, we're doing something outside the box, although it is similar to the question box services that many of you are already familiar with. This is a chance, although certainly far from the only chance, for you to ask me questions to get to know me better. They can be silly or serious, they can be personal or theological. If they're really deep theological ones, I may tell you that that's going to be a whole sermon later rather than trying to answer it in a short form today, but we'll see. I'm going to give your questions for me priority, but if time permits, I may have some questions for you too, which you can consider either a gift or a warning that if you don't have enough questions, then you're going to be the ones answering them. So I invite your questions, and again, raise your hand and a microphone will be brought to you so that everybody, including our Zoom participants, can hear. And if someone on Zoom has a question, they can type it in the chat, and Richard, wave at me and let me know. I see hands.
Diana, I'll start with a softball question, not literally, figuratively. I know that you came from a military family and moved around a lot. I'm just curious, what are some of the places that you lived during your childhood?
Sure. That's maybe not as much as a softball as it sounds like, because sometimes I have to stop and think, did I remember all of them? So I was born in North Dakota, but I don't remember it because we left. I literally spent my second birthday in a hotel room in Rapid City, South Dakota, which was our next place. I spent most of my childhood in Omaha, Nebraska, actually in Bellevue, a suburb of Omaha. My dad was stationed at Offutt there. 2 years in high school in Great Falls, Montana. And then we lived in the Netherlands and in what was then West Germany. Some other time I'll tell the long story of why we were only in the Netherlands less than one school year. It has to do with Reagan signing a treaty that got rid of that base. So we had a little extra upheaval that year. And then from West Germany, then I went to college. So my family kept moving some more after that, but I was moving independently from them. And I did, despite my protestations as a kid that once I was grown up I was going to stay put, I did just keep on moving. So I have now lived in all the various regions of the contiguous United States. I have not lived in Alaska or Hawaii. I've not lived in every state, but I've lived in all the regions. But am a Midwesterner by both genetics and preference, so here I am.
When I chatted with you on Thursday, you mentioned your calling. And can you tell us how that calling happened?
Sure. So it's, I again will try to condense because it's kind of a long story because I tried to ignore it for a really long time, which is not as uncommon as you'd think for clergy. So I was in my mid to late 20s. And the first thing that I didn't recognize then, so most of these moments I only recognize kind of in hindsight, right? But I look back and think, the universe was kind of poking me or perhaps applying a 2x4 occasionally. But the first little poke was I had a roommate, a best friend who was my roommate, and my mom said, I think she'd be a really great UU minister. And my immediate reaction was, hey, what about me? She's not even a UU. And then my second reaction was, oh my gosh, what was that? I don't want to be a minister. And so I then just put it aside. And then the small church that I was a member of at that time went through a period where it had no minister. And so we all just took turns leading services, much like you do in the summer. And I was very reluctant. I hated public speaking. And so I told them, oh, no, I can't serve in that way. I will edit your newsletter. I will help on Sunday mornings with greeting people. But don't put me at a microphone, please. And eventually, my job required me to give lectures in a big auditorium with a lapel mic and my own face up on the screen, which I tried to ignore. And I thought, if I can do this and not die from it for the job that I don't really love, I can do it for the little church that I do love. And so I first served as a worship associate, although they called it something different there, and didn't die from that. And so then they were like, you did a great job, you should come back and do, I don't think they called it a sermon then, the talk maybe. You should come back and do the talk. And I was again very reluctant, but I loved my church very much, so I agreed. And when I did that, I realized, standing in the pulpit, that it actually had nothing, it was nothing like public speaking of other types, because it didn't feel like it was about me, and I didn't have to be an expert, I just had to be authentic. So I was probably 28 or 29, and I just sort of thought, well, maybe someday I'll do this. And I was torn for a while between getting a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing and a Master of Divinity and becoming a minister. I was already a writer at that point. And eventually I met someone who was doing both and realized I didn't have to choose. I did realize that unlike her, I had to choose which one to do first. Doing them both at the same time, she told me, was probably not the kindest thing to do to yourself. So I decided to get the creative writing degree first. And then at that point, I was a mother of a young child, and I was like, well, when he graduates high school, then I can go to seminary. And I ended up as a single mom for about 7 years, and so I especially thought, I can't do this as a single mom. But a small lay-led congregation of about 40 people in North Idaho, which was maybe 45 minutes from where I lived in Spokane, Washington, had me come once a month and speak as their guest speaker. And every 3 or 4 months, when the treasurer handed me the check, he'd say, so when are you going to seminary? And I'd say, oh, no, I'm happy just doing this. Like, this is great. I don't need to do more than this. And he'd say, okay. And then 3 or 4 months would go by, and he'd say, so when are you going to seminary? And I didn't for many more years after that. But when I moved to Colorado with my son, we reconnected with my first childhood UU minister, a woman named Betty Pingle, who's no longer living. But she had retired to the Denver area, and when my mom visited, we went and had tea with her, and my mom did the proud mom thing she always did then, which was, Diana's thinking of going into the ministry. And Betty said, oh, where are you planning to go to seminary? And I said, oh, probably Star King, which is in Berkeley. It's one of our 2 Unitarian Universalist seminaries. And she said, well, have you thought about Iliff School of Theology, which is in Denver? And I said, well, I've seen their billboards, and they look like they're social justice oriented, but that's really all I know about them. And she said, well, that's where I went. You should check it out. And I thought, well, I'm not, again, Aiden was at that point probably in 5th grade maybe, and I thought, well, I'm not going to do this while he's still young. But it can't hurt to go talk to them. And besides, I can't afford it. So there's my easy no, is I can't afford it right now. So I went and I talked to them, and then they offered me financial aid. And the next thing I knew, I was in seminary. So, and it was a progressive Methodist seminary, but it was the absolute right choice for me. Betty was very wise about that. What she didn't tell me, but I brag on her now when I tell this story, she was the first UU woman to graduate from that seminary, and only the second UU, I believe. By the time I went, there was a cohort of about a dozen of us. So it was a long, slow call to ministry. Oh, I forgot to mention, the first time I went to General Assembly, how many of you have been to General Assembly? So the first time I went, my mom had been one time before, and she said, you would love it, you have to come. I went, and I went to a worship service called the Service of the Living Tradition, where they honor all different kinds of religious professionals who are hitting certain milestones in their career or who have died. And the sermon at that one that year was about the call to serve. And I listened to that sermon, and I thought, well, I thought some swear words, so I'm not going to say those, but I was like, oh, no, this is real. I'm going to actually have to do this. But then it was a few more years before that conversation with Betty. Sarah, did I see your hand?
I think you might have told me this, but I tend to forget stories, so you have to, like even my own that I tell, so you may have to tell me 5 times. But how did you meet your lovely Shay?
Oh, okay. So my wife, Shay, who is also a Unitarian Universalist minister, she and I met in October of 2013. We had both started seminary in January of that year, but in different seminaries. She was at Star King, the school that I said I thought I would go to. She went to that school. So she was in Berkeley, I was in Denver, and there was a conference. The acronym was CGOOSE, Continental Gathering of UU Seminarians, and it happened in Boston, and we met there. And we sort of only met at kind of an acquaintance level, just kind of in passing, but she was responsible for coordinating the worship services during that conference, and she invited me to do one of the readings. And that was kind of all the interaction we had then. And then, and we became Facebook friends, but she is hardly at all on Facebook, so there was really not much interaction there either. But she paid enough attention that she knew the basics of my life, like that I lived in Colorado, that I had a son. So then fast forward to 2017, late March of 2017, we crossed paths in Boston again at the UUA headquarters for a different kind of gathering. And there were sparks. And however, she was pretty sure I was straight, because I don't apparently come across to people as not straight. And so we went our separate ways from Boston, and we found out later, we each were asking friends, do you think there's a chance she was flirting with me? And in her case, her friend was like, well, tell me about these interactions. And the friend's like, yeah, I think so. And Shay said, but I think she's straight, so I think you're wrong. I think you're wrong. And the friend, who's on Facebook much more than Shay, went to a Facebook group that this friend is also in, that is Queer UU Religious Professionals, searched my name, found me, said, she's not straight. And to which Shay reportedly said, oh, well, that changes everything. So, and we got together very soon after that, and we're long distance for a while, but that's our origin story, or the short version of it. And some of you met her at the meet and greet back right after I was hired. She will eventually be here some. She's a minister, so she's busy most Sundays. But she and I have a service we do together, and I'm trying to persuade her to come do that with me some Sunday here, so it'll probably happen. I see a couple more hands.
What are some of your experiences with minorities
With minorities, okay.
in a UU tradition, as well as foreign languages in a UU tradition? With minorities, which, of course, I am.
Yes. So as you're aware, Unitarian Universalism is a very predominantly white denomination, and I have served in some of the whiter parts of this country. Boulder, Colorado, and southern New Hampshire are some of the most white places I've served. But even in those places, because we were making intentional efforts to be more multicultural, we did have some people of color in both of those congregations. Before you said in UU congregations, I was going to say most of my experience with minorities came from being in a military family where we were with people of all different backgrounds, races, ethnicities, national origins, all of that. Even though my dad was on the edge of a time when there was not fraternization across racial lines, he thought that was baloney. So we had friends of all different races. There were 4 or 5 families that were kind of like my honorary aunts and uncles and cousins, because we didn't live near my biological family, but we kept getting stationed with these same Air Force families again and again, and one of those families is a black family. Foreign languages, I don't have experience in Unitarian Universalism with foreign languages, and my foreign language is a rusty French, although I've been working on Duolingo to learn Spanish because Spanish is more useful in the US than French is. We don't have a lot of French speakers here. So my experience, I would say, is limited. However, I have intentionally sought out a lot of continuing education programming on multiculturalism, anti-oppression, anti-racism, et cetera. And my internship as a minister, or as a minister in formation, my internship started in August of 2015, which 2014 rather, which most of you know is the month that Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson. So racial justice became part of my call to ministry very early on because of that situation. And the Boulder, Colorado church where I was doing my internship almost immediately put up a Black Lives Matter banner because of a sermon that I preached on that topic. So we dove into that work, and Denver was a place where there was a lot of response happening to that, not all connected to Unitarian Universalism, but we partnered with people. And I guess one thing that would be important for me to say is that as a white woman, in spaces that are multicultural, I consider that it is probably my role to be a follower rather than a leader, and to follow the lead of those most marginalized and who are in charge of whichever event I may be at. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but hopefully it gets at it some. Great.
I'll help you with your Spanish.
Okay. It's very beginner Spanish, I warn you, but I would welcome the chance to practice. I see a hand over here. You're getting your workout this morning. Thank you for volunteering with the microphone.
I'm Jan. We haven't met, but I understand you're a writer. That's your background. Can you tell me a little about that? What kind of writing you do? What
Sure.
kind of writer you are? And if you still practice that?
I do, and I can. So across the decades, it's been many kinds of writing. So my bachelor's degree was in English. You couldn't get a bachelor's at the school I was at specifically in creative writing, so it was a broader English degree, but I took as many creative writing classes as I could within that degree. I have written poetry since I was single digits. I don't know how old I was, but elementary school for sure. I wrote really bad poetry as a teenager when I thought it all had to rhyme and it was melodramatic. It was bad. But I've been writing poetry more seriously since college, and sending stuff out, and once in a rare while getting something published in little magazines here and there. And then not long after getting my bachelor's degree in English, which was not particularly useful in the job market, I did get hired by a magazine to write, first as a freelance writer and then on the staff of the magazine. It was a computing magazine, so it wasn't like up my alley topic-wise, but it was a paycheck from writing, which I thought was pretty cool. And I got to see my name on the masthead of the magazine, which at 23 was also cool. And from there, I did do freelance writing for a number of years for both newspapers and magazines. After my son was born, I wrote a parenting column for 10 years, once a month. That was basically, I didn't say this because they wouldn't have wanted a religion column, but it was basically parenting with my UU values, so I wrote a column about that. I did go on to get a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing from Naropa University in Boulder in 2009, prior to seminary, and came out of that program with like 10 ideas for books that I never then did anything with because I went to seminary and suddenly became very busy with ministry. But I actually did publish my first book last year. In fact, the book just had its first birthday on Tuesday. And that book is called Love is the Why, and it fits in with our theology of love at the center. But there's a whole backstory to it of why I chose Love is the Why. There's a story from seminary that is led to that title, and I am at work on a second book. That one was poetry with just some introductory like mini essays before each of 3 sections in the book, but mostly poetry. And the book I'm working on now is actually sermons and blog posts of mine on social justice issues that I'm gathering into a book. And I work with a phenomenal small nonprofit publisher who works specifically with writers who are marginalized in mainstream publishing, which I'm sorry to say includes women, but also LGBTQIA+ folks, people of color, people with disabilities, et cetera. So she and I have plans for many, many books. So yes, I will keep right on writing. I don't think I could stop if I tried. It's just part of who I am. I see 3 hands. I think Carla's was up first.
Enough softballs. What is your approach to finding the adequate balance between the opposite poles of people, between the head and the heart, between the intellectual and the spiritual?
So I'm going to actually start by saying I think that's a false dichotomy. I don't think that we have to choose between the head and the heart or between the head and the spirit. I think that human beings include all of that. I think that some people have an individual preference that leans one direction or the other. But I am a humanist who is also a spiritual human being. And so when I hear a similar, I know you didn't use these words, Carla, but a similar spectrum where it puts humanism on one end and spirituality on the other, I think that's false. I am absolutely confident that I am both a person grounded in reason and science and someone who has deeply spiritual, I would even say mystical experiences. So I think it's a false dichotomy, and so how I hold the balance is to A, challenge the dichotomy, and B, to recognize that over the course of one worship service or 1 month with the Soul Matters theme or one congregational year, part of my job is to have some that lean in one direction and some that lean in another, but to touch on both head, heart, and spirit all the time. I was taught in seminary that on any given Sunday, if 70% of people are happy with your service, you've done a really phenomenal job, because humans are humans and you don't all think or believe the same things, right? Or prefer the same things. So I might or might not choose hymns that you love on a given Sunday. But the goal, again from seminary, but I believe this fully, the goal is to not have it be the same 30% of people all the time who feel not included. So hopefully if I lead a service that you're kind of like, nah, that wasn't really for me, or you even actively disagreed with me, which by the way, I'm fine with, like I can handle that, you're allowed to disagree. Hopefully then the next week is more to your liking. And if 1 month's theme, which by the way, I don't choose the Soul Matters themes, that comes from Soul Matters, but if 1 month's theme really doesn't do it for you, hopefully the next month's will. But I also always invite congregations to think about if you're sitting out there and not loving something that's happening, whether it's just one hymn or one reading or one sermon, that there's probably somebody in the room for whom that's exactly what they need and want. And one of the most extreme examples, it shouldn't be extreme. One of the examples that I've encountered in every congregation I've served is that we tend to steer away from even readings or songs that touch on Christianity, and yet there are Christian Unitarian Universalists. And in every congregation I've served, a Christian UU or more than one has come out to me with much more nervousness than any queer person has ever come out to me in a UU space. And there's something in that about how safe we are for different kinds of people to be fully themselves. So I challenge us to remember, if Diana preached a sermon and said God a whole bunch of times today, and I don't like that there's probably somebody in this room who's like been hungry for that, and I met their need that day. So it's a graciousness towards each other to say, I'm not here as a consumer to get what I want every minute of every day. I'm here as part of a community where we together meet each other's needs. I hope that answered your question without going way far off track.
As someone who may or may not be feeling that universal 2x4, what are your advice to lay leaders?
I'm going to ask a clarifying question first. To lay leaders who might or might not be discerning a call to ministry, is that the question?
No, to lay leadership in
To
general.
lay leadership in general.
Small steps.
Small steps, okay. One option is always come talk to your minister and help with discernment. Another is to try it, to try something. I am big on experimentation, and I always have been, but especially, let's just say, since about 2016, our world has been unpredictable, changeable, and so we have to experiment with things, and I think that's true on the grand scale, but also the small scale. So try a thing, see if you enjoy it, see if it nourishes your spirit. My goal is that lay leaders are serving in ways that also nourish them rather than drain you. If it drains you, it might be a better job for somebody else who it will nourish. If it nourishes you, you may have found your spot. Some of you have found many spots. I'm aware that there are many of you that wear lots of hats in this congregation, but I hope it's in ways that nourish you. So that would be the sort of first discernment marker, is how do you feel about it? It also matters in certain roles if you have the right skill set. There are roles in a congregation that you can be easily trained in, and there are roles where you need to come, like, we don't want somebody with no financial experience to be the next treasurer, right? So some of them require a specific background, but most congregational leadership roles, people can be trained into if they want that role. And I'm always happy to have those conversations, whether it's on the small scale or the larger scale.
Would you ever consider combining your creative writing and the fellowship in order to do writing workshops or things like that for the congregation?
Absolutely. I have in the past taught a class that I usually call something like writing as spiritual practice. So it's not writing with the intent of publication, it's writing for yourself. And then, certainly you can choose to then submit those for publication, but that's not the focus of the writing class the way it might be if you were taking one at a college or somewhere. So I have done that and would consider doing that again. The board and I were just talking yesterday at the board retreat about that one of the things we'll be doing in this beginning part of the year is setting kind of the priorities for where my time goes and how much adult faith formation kind of stuff I do, along with how much of all these other buckets of ministry that I'm doing. So right now I'm not promising any specific courses, but that is one that would be possible for me to offer. I have also used my own launch of a new book as a public event that can draw people into a congregation. I was serving in Mankato last year when my book came out, and we held an event there that got people from the community to come in, so I'm happy to sort of put that in service to the congregation as well. And I know that in the past, Jeannie has taught some writing classes because she's also a writer, and she and I have talked about, I'm not committing her to anything, let me be very, very clear, but she and I have had a conversation at least about the possibility of us maybe co-facilitating something or taking turns with different weeks or having some way of sharing that so that it's a shared responsibility. So it's on our radar for sure. I see Greg's hand again.
Have you ever dealt with conflict situations, hecklers, disruptive personalities, and human beings in your experience?
Absolutely. I have not been in a situation as a minister in worship where somebody came in and was disruptive in the worship service. I have been a minister in congregations where there was someone in the wider community with mental health issues who would sometimes show up on Sundays and while not disrupting the worship service, kind of disrupting coffee hour. And I've taken that person to my office and had conversations to move it out of the coffee hour space. Luckily, not a situation where it felt physically threatening, or I wouldn't have taken the person alone to my office with me. What I have dealt with more, because it's more common in congregational life, not just Unitarian Universalist congregational life, but in general, is conflict within the congregation where somebody has an agenda that they're trying to get the whole congregation to do that is maybe not in alignment with what the congregation has stated as its mission and vision, and having to navigate that kind of, I'm still going to call it disruption. It's not the same kind of disruption as somebody walking in shouting in worship. As a tangent, I will say I think it's good to have a plan for what you do if somebody comes in and is actively, heckling, disrupting. And one of the ideas I've heard from a colleague is you get out your hymnal and you start singing with hymn number 1, and you keep singing until either law enforcement arrives if somebody has called them or the person leaves. Now, that might not work in every situation, but I thought it was an interesting technique when a colleague told me they had done that. That was in New Orleans, where one of our congregations was known for its work around reproductive health care, and some anti-abortion protesters came into their worship service shouting horrible things, and they just sang over top of the shouting, and somebody did call for law enforcement to come remove them from the property. So I have been fortunate not to have that level of disruption, but I think every minister who's been a minister for more than about 6 months has handled conflict in a congregation in some way. Most of it stays low enough level that the congregation as a whole may not even know it's happening. I have also dealt with somebody who came into one of the congregations I served and was criticizing me for things that I said, affirming the holiness of transgender people, and I said, that's absolutely not negotiable, and if that's not okay with you, then this is not the congregation for you. So that's one of the ways I handle some conflict, is to just hold a boundary that I believe is not just my boundary, but our faith's boundary. I see a hand in the back again.
Just to make sure I understood correctly, the seminary that you went to was Methodist affiliated, is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
I grew up in a Methodist congregation in small town Iowa, and ironically, there are 4 of us here who went to the same Methodist college at the same time and didn't know each other then, but met here. So I guess I'm curious what you gained from being at a Methodist seminary that maybe helped you be a better UU minister.
That's a great question, thank you. So I'll preface my answer by saying that a now no longer living retired colleague of mine offered wisdom to people entering the process of becoming a minister, that if, like me, they grew up as a Unitarian Universalist, they might benefit from going to a seminary that wasn't Unitarian Universalist to get a broader exposure. And in particular, I grew up in what I would call a very secular humanist UU congregation that very rarely talked about Christianity at all. And I am not a Christian, but our culture, there's like a cultural literacy piece that I felt like I was missing by not having learned almost anything about Christian scripture or Christian history. And so being at a Christian seminary gave me classes, not that there aren't classes in that at UU seminaries, but it's different. It also gave me, so I started to say, the advice from the colleague was, if you grow up UU, consider a non-UU seminary. If you're like my wife, who was raised Catholic and was new to Unitarian Universalism and very quickly felt a call to ministry. She had felt a call to ministry. She played priest when she was a little kid instead of playing school, but she was a girl, so she knew she couldn't be a priest, and she didn't want to be a nun. She was super clear that priest was the job she wanted. So once she found a faith that fit her and it allowed women ministers, she was like all in very quickly. And this colleague did not know her, but would have advised her to do exactly what she did, which is go to a UU seminary to get the grounding in our history and theology that you don't have if you're brand new. So all that to say, that's part of why I chose ILIF. Also, the recommendation from my childhood minister carried a lot of weight with me. And they're a very progressive Methodist seminary, but back to the part of your question about what did it do to help make me a better UU minister, there was that learning about Christianity and filling in that gap in my education. But also, I became part of a cohort that was very theologically diverse. So it's a Methodist seminary, but at the time I was there, I don't know the numbers now. At the time I was there, only about half the student body was Methodist, and there were 38 faith traditions represented in the student body as a whole. About 12 of us were UU, but there were Muslims, there were Jewish students, there were pagan students, there were a couple of Mormon students, because although the Mormon faith does not require any kind of Master's of Divinity degree, if they want to be chaplains in the military, they have to have a Master of Divinity degree, and we were one of the schools that would welcome them. So I had a couple of Mormon classmates. Catholics, all manner of Protestants, you know, lots of Methodists, but also Lutherans, Presbyterians, Baptists. A couple of my classmates in my particular cohort year were not like super far-right conservative Baptists, but they were more conservatives, and they were coming specifically because they wanted to be exposed to more liberal ideas. Not that they were themselves likely to become liberal, but they wanted to be able to operate in an interfaith environment with liberal clergy. And so being in that really diverse cohort prepared me to do interfaith work with more knowledge and more understanding than I would have had coming in. I would always have wanted to be involved in interfaith work and have been for my whole ministry, but I would have come in sort of uneducated. And I also now have these friends who I can call up and say, can you explain to me what the Presbyterians think about XYZ? Or can you explain to me, you know, well, I don't have to ask about Catholics anymore. I have an in-house expert on that. But, you know, I could go to these different folks and ask them to help me understand. And that has been super helpful. Yes.
Kind of, there we go. Hello, there we go.
There we go.
Kind of piggybacking off of that, how do you deal with both individuals and the theological concept of people weaponizing religion, especially today?
So I think it's probably true that religion has been weaponized for about as long as religion has existed. And we are certainly in a time where one part of the political spectrum has sort of claimed the religious voice in the public square, specifically the Christian voice, while not being representative of Christianity as I understand it broadly. Like from my seminary friends, it's a very narrow interpretation, but they are the dominant voice out there. So I know that part of my call is to be a voice countering that, a different kind of religious voice in the public square. I forgot to say, when you asked about writing, I am currently about a little over a third of the way through a Doctor of Ministry degree in creative writing and public theology. So that is the merging of my two major through lines in my career, right? Ministry and writing. And so part of that is that we need more voices like ours out in the public sphere, not so much to try to get people to come join us, but to represent different, I mean, that's great too, but to represent that there are other religious voices, that there are religious voices that say, as I keep saying, trans people are holy. Not just fine, but holy, right? Like the rest of us. That there are religious voices that say all human beings of all genders get to choose what to do with their bodies. Those kinds of messages. So I think, I'm not sure if I've gone off track from your question, but I think that my job as a UU minister, but also our job as a UU community, is to put messaging out that counters the weaponizing of religion by representing that religion is not just this wide, it's this. And part of how I do that is through interfaith involvement, so that I'm not out there like the Lone Ranger doing it myself. I'm out there as a group of clergy members from a wide range of faiths, including rabbis and imams, saying, our faith says no to this. Our faith says all people are divine, whatever it might be. Did that answer your question? Okay. And I'm going to make this our last question because I just looked at the time and we're 1 minute over. We don't have much yet to do, so we're good to take this one last question.
Hi, my name is Sue. I'm cognizant that our services are on Zoom and that public sphere is something that can be shared by link to people and is being potentially watched by people who are curious, who are in a position in our current society where they are looking for a home or just curious about a home. If you had the opportunity to speak directly to those people, now at this point, when you're in the middle of the transition here, what would you might say to them who are watching now?
Oh, I mean, part of what I hope to say to them is the same things that I say to all of us, right? Like I don't think of that as a different audience than who's in the room, and I always assume we could have new people both places any Sunday. So I hope that I'm always saying things that are both useful to those of you who've been UUs a long time and to somebody who's walked in for the very first time. One of the things that I would emphasize is that we are a non-creedal faith, and so there's no test of belonging based on what you believe or don't believe about God or Jesus or what happens when you die or any of those big human questions, but that we have our shared values, and I would uplift those values: justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, inclusion, thank you. Interdependence, the I is interdependence, and grounded in love, centered in love. So I would emphasize that message again and again and again because it is the core of who we are. And my belief is that's been the core of who we are for a very long time. This is just a new articulation of it. It's not a new set of values. I would also, something that I tell visitors all the time is if you go, or people who talk to me outside of church and say they're thinking about coming and checking out a service, I always say, well, first of all, if you go to one UU service, you've experienced one UU service. Like, it is not the same across time or across congregations. And I don't mean to imply that it is exactly the same in other denominations, but like, we don't have a lectionary, so we're not told what topics each Sunday is about. We don't have assigned scripture readings each Sunday. Some denominations do. So if you go to a Methodist church, the lectionary for that week is the same, right? So I tell them, if you go one Sunday and it wasn't quite the right fit for you, go back again, try it again. If it's a congregation with a minister and they go on a Sunday that's not the minister, I say go back on a Sunday where the minister is there because it will matter to you whether you feel like a good fit with that minister. And if a particular UU church doesn't feel like the right fit for you, go try another one because they have different personalities. And again, I'm not implying that different Methodist or Lutheran or Catholic churches don't have different personalities. They do. So I would probably say the same thing to someone visiting them, but I think it's very true that ours are so different that somebody could find a really good fit one place and not a good fit somewhere else. And that includes that false dichotomy of mind versus spirit. There are congregations that are more or less spiritual, more or less intellectual and heady, and people will sort themselves into the one that feels like the best fit if they try out more than one. Because my goal is not hoard all the UUs here in this congregation. My goal is help everybody find a faith community that feels right for them and nourishes their soul. And if that's here, fabulous. And if it's at First Universalist or First Unitarian, great. So that's part of what I would tell people, whether on Zoom or in person. And I would invite people on Zoom to come in person if they can, and to know that they are fully welcome and included if Zoom is the only way they can participate, whether it's because they don't live here or health concerns or whatever it may be. And that I am still their minister too, and to reach out if they need me. All right, thank you for your questions. We are now several minutes over. How do we feel about still singing one of my favorite hymns together? Are we okay with that, or do we need to skedaddle? Okay. All right, so it is hymn number 298, Wake Now My Senses. And if you're using the hymnal instead of the screen, it's one of the sneaky ones that has some verses on the top of the next page.
Feel the deep
please join me for the words of our chalice extinguishing. Extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And our closing words this morning are by my friend and colleague, Reverend Joel Miller. Let our lives be a prayer that waters dry souls, mends broken hearts, refuses to be terrorized, seeks this world's beauty, and carries us through its storms. May it be so.